Hi and welcome. This is Nana from How to Do Fashion, and today I want to talk about something that I find very important when we are dealing with sewing patterns. What I'm going to talk about is notches and markings. And as a sewing pattern designer, I know that you will find this on all the sewing patterns that you will deal with when you're using sewing patterns. A marking and a notch is our way as a sewing pattern designer to communicate to the one who are going to sew our patterns. These markings and notches help you to know where we want you to place the pocket, how to assemble a side seam, and also to tell you how much you need to hem a skirt or a shirt. When you look at a sewing pattern like this, you will find some different signs. And here we have what I call a notch. It can look like this. It's a simple stroke, approximately 0.5 centimeter, but it can also have a stroke the other way to tell you and define where you should stop your marking when making a small cut into your fabric. Because that is what you are doing with a notch. Here is a notch at the side seam, and this notch tells you that at this place you have the side seam, and you have to match up this notch with the same notch that you have on your back side. As a sewing pattern designer, this is common knowledge, but I know it's not. I have beginners as well as very, very skilled sewers that are attending my sewing workshops, and they don't use notches. I think it's because they don't know how much they can help when sewing, because the notches makes it easier for you to match up a side seam. And personally, if I have a great amount of notches, I do not use as many pins as I would if there were no notches. It also helps me if I get lost in a sewing project. And sometimes you need to take out your pattern again to look at it and see, which seams is going to match up. But when you have notches, they can help you to match up your pieces correctly. I don't use as many pins when I have notches as if I don't have any notches. And I think a good sewing pattern has the right amount of notches. I think it's important to have it at the side seam, especially at the waist, but I also think it's important to have it in the arm side to tell you what is front and what is back. Because there is this international language about what tells you what is the front of the arm side and what is the back. And two notches always tells you that it's the back piece, where one notch is the front piece. I think the most important notch on the sleeve is the top notch. We need to have a notch that tells us where the shoulder seam is. Otherwise, if we have a sleeve with ease, the ease can be placed in a wrong way and it can be almost impossible to sew in the sleeve. So you can see the notches, they are important. We also have other markings on our patterns, and it's a bit different from pattern company to pattern company. I use these markings, and this is punch holes. It actually does the same as the notch in the seam does, but you cannot make a small cut in the middle of the fabric because then you will ruin the fabric. These punch holes I use for telling where to place a pocket. I also place them at the end of the dart, at the pivot point of the dart, to tell you where to stop the dart. And I use these punch holes as a guidance, but also as a very important tool for me to communicate to the one who are sewing my patterns. When you make your markings onto the fabric, I use two different kind of methods. For all notches, I make a small cut. It can be quite difficult if you work in materials that fray very easily, like boucle, and then you need to make a basting stitch to like draw with thread on your fabric. But in a lot of fabric, you can make a small notch. A punch hole is a bit more tricky. You can use different kind of methods. Some people like to make a base stitch. Personally, I prefer to use pins. And what I do, I just place the pin and put it through the paper. And on the back side, I just gently pull the pin through the paper. So now I have the marking on one side of the fabric. And then I turn over the fabric and I put a pin on the other side. You have to remember that where you have put your pin down, that is where the marking is going to be. Because when you put a pin down, you also have to, pin it up again. So you actually have two markings, but it is always closest to the head of your pin. Personally, I don't prefer the basting method where I make a basting stitch at the notches, the punch holes. However, I do it if I work in a loosely woven fabric. When I was a tailor apprentice, my teacher was sitting on my back like a hawk telling me, do your notches, make your markings, because I can see that today. She just wants to learn me to do these things and do it properly and regularly, because it is making the sewing much faster and much easier. That was all from me for today. I hope you will have a lovely weekend. See you soon.